The commons is fundamentally spiritual because it asks us to perceive the world and our place in it in terms of relationship rather than ownership. It invites us to see ourselves not as isolated individuals, but as members of a vast and interconnected whole. And this is where Teilhard de Chardin enters the conversation. Regular listeners and viewers will recall that Teilhard, the Jesuit priest and paleontologist, believed that human consciousness is evolving toward what he called the omega point, a state of unified awareness characterized by love, cooperation, connection, and spiritual integration. He believed that evolution is not just biological, but also psychological, social, and spiritual. And crucially, he believed that the direction of evolution is toward increasing unity. If Teilhard was alive today, I believe he would recognize the commons as a spiritual laboratory, a place where humanity is learning how to evolve beyond its fragmented state. The commons forces us to confront our interdependence. It requires us to develop the capacity for collective care. It invites us into what Teilhard would call the sphere of love, where we recognize ourselves as participants in a larger whole. But moving from tragedy to glory is not easy. It requires sacrifice. And here we must be honest. Sacrifice is a deeply spiritual discipline. Every meaningful choice costs something. I express this as opportunity cost. To say yes to stewardship is to say no to exploitation. To say yes to the long-term flourishing of the commons is to say no to short-term personal gain. To say yes to unity is to say no to the comfort of isolation or the illusion of self-sufficiency. Every stage of human spiritual development involves a surrender of ego, and the commons is where that surrender becomes practical. It is where spiritual growth meets physical reality. It is where the integration of the physical and spiritual become visible. But here's the key insight. Sacrifice in this context is not loss, but investment. When we sacrifice to the commons, we are not diminishing ourselves, we are enlarging ourselves. We are expanding our identity to include the whole. We are shifting from the small self to the larger self. In spiritual terms, we are participating in self-transcendence. Self-transcendence is the third way beyond selfish and selfless. Selfishness says, I win, you lose. Selflessness, in its unhealthy form, says, you win, I lose. But self-transcendence says, we rise together. It says that the flourishing of the individual and the flourishing of the whole are not in conflict, but in alignment. It sees the self not as an isolated entity, but as a node in a larger web of being. This is why the glory of the commons is not just a social or ecological idea. It is a spiritual invitation. It invites us to ask, what kinds of beings are we becoming? What kind of future are we shaping? What does it mean to live in a relationship with the whole? What are we willing to give up and to take on in service of something greater than ourselves?